public buses, bridges, public universities, stadiums, etc. These are all amenities and infrastructures provided by the federal government for the welfare of its citizens. But where actually do all these things come from? This is what we have to understand as citizens of a country, that all these things don't just come out of thin air. There's a reason behind this, which is tax. So what is tax? Tax refers to a compulsory levy imposed on citizens of a country by its government in order to source revenue for its expenditures. Expenditures, as I mentioned earlier. So it's an obligation of every citizen of a country to pay that tax in order for the movement and the efficiency in the administration of government activities.
Before I go on, I would love to give definition of some terms. Prospect is the possibility of future success in an endeavor or in a pursuit. Then you have career. Career is an occupation which one devotes his time to, puts his energy, his skills in order to accomplish it for a good future. Then tax. Tax is a compulsory contribution which is imposed by the government authorities through their agencies such as FIRS, SBIRS on the income of individuals as well as the profits of companies and the goods and services. Taxation is the process of levying, collecting, and assessing taxes from taxpayers. Basically, looking at Nigeria and the economic activity and our national existence, you can all tell me and you can all see that taxation as a career choice has high prospects. Because with the money that flows into our country, definitely with our high population, every minute and every second, we have businesses put in place. And now, before one can journey into taxation as a career choice, I would love for us to know the requirements that we need to meet. Taxation as a career choice is not just only open to business students, it's open to humanities students, science departments, as well as business. And I, as a science student, I would chase a bachelor's degree in computer science, which will enable me with the knowledge and the skills to create softwares and programs that help me to revolutionize taxation in the digital economy.
The significance of tax to the development of any modern economy cannot be undermined. The policy of taxes symbolizes the redistribution of cardinal resources amongst public and private sectors in a country. Thus, it is imposed on individuals and corporate bodies in a country. Before I go further, let me define taxation. Taxation can be defined as the principal method by which the government gains revenue into its budget through the imposition of compulsory levies on private entities and individuals. The revenue produced through taxes are recycled by the government in order to support positive developments which add value to the country's education, healthcare, unemployment assistance, pension scheme for retired public workers, as well as public transportation system. There are multiple prospects of taxation as a career choice. I'm sure some of you are wondering, why should I choose taxation as a career? Today, I'm going to be giving you a couple reasons why a career in taxation would be best for you. It is very discouraging for some people to think of a career where day-to-day routines are repeated and there is no change or challenge ahead. Well, choosing a career in taxation would change this, as careers in taxation not only involve calculations, but involve a little bit of everything, like law. Understanding law is a crucial part of a career in taxation. Understanding human psychological behavior is also a crucial part in taxation, because to have a career in taxation, you have to be able to communicate with different people of different personalities. In addition to lack of career stagnation, choosing a career in taxation would enable you to be excellently paid. And who doesn't like being paid well?
Those with their say are the taxmen and women of the future. What you just saw are sights and sounds from the 2022 edition of the public speaking competition on taxation for secondary school students, organized by the Lagos chapter of the Society of Women in Taxation, SWIT, with the theme, The Prospects of Taxation as a Career Choice in Nigeria. We have decided to start on this note because it is in tandem with one of the focuses of the recently held 7th General Assembly of the African Tax Administration Forum, ATAF, hosted by Nigeria from the 31st of October to the 4th of November 2022. As you will find in the story of the 7th ETAF General Assembly, which is the main story on this episode, one of the panel sessions was on Human Capital in Tax Administration, Tax Person of the Future. Yes, it is important that the tax person of the future is in tune with the paradigm shift in business operations around the globe. Disruptive technology, online business, online shopping, online payments. And these young ones are the today and the tomorrow of tax practice anywhere in the world. The program is Tax Matters, and I'm Chamaka Ohaochi. Welcome once again. From Monday the 31st of October to Friday the 4th of November 2022, Nigeria played host to taxmen and women from 42 African countries under the aegis of the African Tax Administration Forum. It was the 7th General Assembly of ATAF. What is ATAF and what is the General Assembly all about?
The ATAF General Assembly provides ample opportunity for peer review and knowledge sharing on emerging issues in tax administration in Africa. It has, since its inception, provided the needed platform for regional interaction, collaboration, and capacity building for member countries. The unprecedented global shocks since the year 2020 to date, occasioned by COVID-19, are currently made worse by the Russia-Ukraine war. These unfortunate incidents have placed a significant burden on all revenue authorities in Africa of having to devise innovative means and adopt new strategies that are less dependent on external economic factors to fund the rising budgetary needs of the government at all levels. In addition to this situation is the challenge posed by digital economy, where business transactions have moved from the brick and mortar model to the digital space, thereby creating emerging issues in tax ecosystem for developing African countries. Therefore, effective and efficient domestic revenue mobilization has become more critical and urgent than ever before, as tax revenue is the most sustainable source of financing development globally.
On his own part, Mr. Logan Ward, Executive Secretary of ATAF, commended Nigeria for the tremendous support it has given to ATAF from inception in 2009.
It comes as no surprise to ATAF at all that Nigeria has been a strong and consistent pillar of this organization since we started in 2009. As a member of the steering committee that was entrusted to be a pioneer of this organization, the challenges upon us as revenue administration, tax authorities is immense. The theme of our conference is rethinking revenue strategies, the human face of taxation. We do not only want to look at tax administration, but we want to look at the social contract. When a citizen pays tax to the state, what is it that drives that compliance? What is it that the citizens expect from the state when they pay their taxes? So therefore, we will look at this conference at the social contract between citizens and the state and how that social contract influences tax compliance.
The keynote address was presented by the Statistician General of the Federation, Mr. Semiu Adeniran, on behalf of the Honorable Minister of State for Budget and National Planning, Mr. Clement Abba, while the special guest of honor, Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu, the governor of Lagos State, was represented by the executive chairman of the LRS, Mr. Ayodele Sobara. To kickstart the General Assembly, a lead paper was presented on the theme of the conference by Ms. Winnie Bayemma, the executive director of UNAIDS. Mr. Nami, in his welcome remarks, said, and we quote, "The ETAP General Assembly provides ample opportunity for peer review and knowledge sharing on emerging issues in tax administration. Against this background, a total of 6 panel sessions were held in the course of the next 3 days. Panel 1 was on taxation and development, enhancing the quality of life in African countries."
Esteemed delegates, like our theme has been shared this morning, is rethinking revenue strategies, the human face of taxation. Our plenary for this afternoon, we're going to be discussing taxation and development, enhancing the quality of life in African countries. Now, Africa's Agenda 2063 and the global SDGs 2030 share similar development goals requiring one thing, and that is financing. Specifically, the AU Agenda 2063 intends to build the Africa we want. And it is our commitment by African heads of state and government to transform Africa into a global powerhouse through the 7 aspirations and 20 goals articulated in the 50 strategic framework priorities set in the first 10-year implementation plan. Now, to achieve this huge dream that we have of the Africa we want, governments require financial resources and domestic revenue mobilization. And it's expected to contribute at least 70% to 90% per average per country. Now, it is expected that Africa takes full responsibility for financing her development, and improved tax revenue will have to take prime position. So the objective, ladies and gentlemen, of this particular session is to have a high-level conversation of the importance of DRM, domestic revenue mobilization, to development financing, including the areas of focus and reforms to enhance physical resource mobilization, maximization of natural resources, and curbing of illicit financial flows.
The second panel session on tax as a social contract and civic duty, managing taxpayers' perception, had as one of the panelists Mrs. Ehile Ayibambe, a member of the board of the FIRS. Mrs. Ayibambe used the opportunity to share the mode of operations at the FIRS, especially since the coming of the Muhammad Nami administration.
My question to you is, one of the noted influencers of tax morale is the key issue of trust between taxpayers and the government. This trust is built on citizens' belief in the state with respect to democracy, meritocracy, transparency, and availability of public goods and services. Considering that these factors don't fall under direct influence of the Revenue Administration, how has the Federal Inland Revenue Services approached building a trust environment to facilitate compliance?
Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner General. Please permit me to just lean on all existing protocol and say thank you to ETA for having me here. I'm really honored to be here. I think the conversation around trust it starts with being open and honest, and also beyond being open and honest is also transparency and communication about what you want to achieve and what you want to do. With our role as tax administrators, it's a bit challenging, I would say, because one, you are the government that the taxpayer sees whenever you come to ask for funds or whenever you ask them to cut you a check, for their tax liability. So you have that faith, like Professor mentioned earlier, to the people. Secondly, as well, also is the trust you need to build even internally with your employees, whether be it your board members, your staff, your principals, the Treasury or the Ministry of Finance, like you have it, or even just your suppliers, your contractors and your suppliers. So the trust conversation is something that is quite huge. And in Africa, like we have it, where there's a lot of the social contract conversation, and there's a huge trust deficit between citizens and the government. It makes our work as administrators much, much tougher. When we came on board in 2019, I think that was one of the key things we found on ground. And in answering your question, madam, I will take you from two perspectives in terms of what we did internally and then also what we did externally. Starting with what we did internally, we met a service where there was already breakdown of law and order, like my chairman always says, and the trust deficit was really huge. So the first thing was, first of all, to even reposition that organization, hand over the service back to the staff and employees, because prior to that, it was a lot of, the service was being run by consultants, and the employees felt that they had lost, relevance and purpose in their place of work. So I think the first conversation I recall, within a week when he was announced as chairman, the first thing he did was to say, we're giving back the service to the employees of the service. That sort of helped set a different tone, for the employees, and then it sort of started reshaping how they saw the new management and board coming on board. The second thing was then looking at the organization structure. And as board and management, one of the things we said to ourselves was we needed an organizational structure that was right, that was also going to help us achieve, what we wanted to achieve within our tenure. So we placed emphasis on risk management a lot. We placed particularly on enterprise risk. We placed emphasis on data. So we placed emphasis on technology. We placed emphasis on new markets. So we looked at new markets that were available and emerging markets and what we wanted to do from how to tap into those markets. So we restructured from that perspective. Then we also then looked internally and then said to ourselves, you also need to then deal with your taxpayer service unit. And we also placed emphasis on the taxpayer service unit because they are the front line to your taxpayers. So we placed emphasis on rebuilding that unit, and I would say with pride that that's one of the best run departments within the service today. Then externally, we looked at it, I would say, from 6 perspectives. The first one was in terms of how does the taxpayer relate to us? So when we came on board, there was no formalized, if you permit me to use that word, way of relating to the tax authorities. So either you had a number of your tax controller, or you had an email address or something. So that was what started the journey of our contact center. So we needed to put in a contact center, and I hope that's something some of the administrators can borrow. We needed to put in a contact center where you don't need to always walk into the tax office, right? So you can get your issues resolved. It's multilingual, and it operates effectively. We have all the tax experts, on dial, and it was easy for the taxpayer to start communicating with the tax office without necessarily having to walk in or even have a number or know somebody within the FIRS. Then secondly, we then looked at technology. Technology was very paramount because it's one of the cardinal goals of the executive chairman. He keeps saying that I want to build an organization where data was at the center of every decision we took. So technology helps us do that. And we then started with our in-house tool. We have our own inbuilt IT system, and we've seen that grow in leaps and bounds. It's a year plus now that we've launched and we've successfully used it, and we've seen that has also reduced the traffic of taxpayers coming in, and that has also ensured that the taxpayers you don't need to come to the FIRS, you don't need to come and see someone, you can sit in your office at the click of a button and have everything done. So you don't as if someone is asking you for one thing or the other, and then in doing technology, that enables us to do what we call accountability. That was the third point we had to do. And in ensuring that we're accountable, we started to say, okay, how do we make sure that we're accountable to our taxpayers and our various stakeholders? working with some other tax administrators here, we're trying to develop our whistleblowing framework, so to just make sure that if there are infractions, whether internally or externally, whether by the taxpayer or by our staff, people can easily whistleblow and let us know what it is, and we can address it extensively. That has the board attention because the report directly, the framework is being designed in a manner where it goes directly, to the head of internal audit. The chairman of the whistleblowing committee is a board member and not even within the service. So that protects the integrity of the process. So that was the third thing we did from an accountability perspective. The fourth thing we did was then from a stakeholder perspective, asking, going back to the conversation that Angela was saying, was that what do we expect from our taxpayers and what do our taxpayers expect from us? So we looked inward and we then developed what we call the FIRS Charter, which was also launched recently, just basically saying, this is what we will do. These are what our commitments are to our taxpayers, and in terms of our service delivery, our excellence, integrity, you can trust us, and the rest of it. And then this is also what we expect back from our taxpayers: commitment, voluntary compliance, and the rest of it. And in going through that, another thing we've also done this year is to launch what we did called our perception survey, just to get feedback. Also in the trust conversation, how do we then get feedback, from our taxpayers to tell us how we're doing? And whatever you then tell us, we then feed into our plans for 2023, right? The fifth thing we did internally was then, I want to target our CSR activities. We're autonomous in Nigeria, so when we get our monies out of our cost of collection. But one of the things we did was to put in a strong governance around how we do our CSR activities. So there's a committee, there's a proper committee, and the rest of it. So rather than distribute that money as bonuses, we try to give back, just to fix that trust deficit in the society. Give back to the community where we get taxes from. I'm aware that there's some marketplaces where we've promised to put some basic amenities, just to support, lack of government presence in that market. Finally, the last thing we did, and I think the chairman alluded to that today, was reporting. So having the conversations with the politicians on how do you report projects in your state, or how do you report projects that you're doing with taxpayers' money? Ensure you're reporting it that it is taxpayers' money used by me, but back for taxpayers. I mean, that's really the conversation around how we report. How we measure, I think I would say we've measured in two perspectives. One is in our level of collection. We've had unprecedented level of collections this year. We've basically funded the government allocation for up to about 60%. This year, never been done before. And then also, it's also with respect to feedback, from our taxpayers.
Thank you so much, Madam Mahile, I think, for that discussion on what FIRS is doing to ensure that we build trust. Thank you.
Next episode, we'll continue sharing with you snippets from sessions held on day 2 and day 3. Of course, there are loads and loads of interviews with tax experts from across the African continent. This is just the first installment of the story of the 7th General Assembly of ATAF. It was a huge and very well attended event. And as you have found out, the world of business is changing, and the tax person, the taxman, the taxwoman must change with the times. We are coasting home. You will recall that in the opening segment of this episode, we brought you snippets from the secondary school public speaking competition. The event is the brainchild of the Lagos chapter of the Society of Women in Taxation under the able leadership of Barrister Mrs. Cecilia Odibo. Mrs. Odibo is herself a taxwoman, plying her trade at the FIRS, currently serving as a tax controller at Alaba MSTO in Lagos. What is the idea behind the public speaking competition?
The aim of this public speaking competition is to establish the significance and necessity of taxation to societal development as a veritable choice of career for the younger generation to embrace. This forum is therefore a stage to provide the background and impetus necessary to stimulate the interest of our younger generation from the secondary school level towards taking taxation as their first choice of study in the future. To do diligent speaking of this carefully chosen topic are intelligent children selected from 16 private secondary schools across the states.
Talk about succession planning, talk about giving back. The full story of the public speaking competition, very interesting story we assure you, will come to you very soon. Watch out. Up sweet, up our viewers. Let us meet again on this platform next week for a fresh episode of this program. Thank you for watching.